One of the things that I did want to talk about and address is another wave of divorces that we've been seeing happen. And a lot of them have been by professing believers, which is always a fascinating topic to me. What's up, everybody? This is Josh for Practical Theism. Hope everybody's doing well today. Hope quarantine is still going well for you, though things are starting to open up around the country. Today, I wanted to talk about Christian divorce. This is something that I've seen, quite honestly, pretty rampant, especially amid the stay-home initiatives and the quarantine. There's no shortage of data showing that there's been an increase in domestic abuse cases and domestic violence cases. Those situations, quite honestly, just like irk me to the core, and they rub me the wrong way in so many ways. Like, I get sick to my stomach seeing spouses hurt each other. But one of the things that we've seen spawn out of this is a lot of divorces. Now, to be clear, in this video, I don't want to talk about cases with specifically that are people getting divorced with respect to abuse. It's a very, very terrible thing, and it's not something I intend to talk about in this channel specifically. But one of the things that I did want to talk about and address is another wave of divorces that we've been seeing happen. And a lot of them have been by professing believers, which is always a fascinating topic to me because, in my opinion, it's pretty transparently clear if you look biblically and you follow any kind of church creed that Jesus didn't really want divorce, and that divorce was intended to be long term. And many of these professing believers who are getting divorced, the reasons they're citing, they're not because of abuse, but they're just, we grew apart, it's very peaceful, it's amicable, it's fruitful, it's fine. And some of them are like big, high up social media influencers or big celebrities who are professing a Christian faith, but still saying, we're gonna still be friends and we'll still be partners, but it's just not, working out. It's just not working out. And whenever I hear that, the first thing that immediately pops into my head is you're just not wanting it to work out. Something else took priority and took precedence. My wife and I were talking about this the other day, and it's the grass is going to be green wherever you water it. So if you're not watering your marriage and you're not helping your marriage have life and breathing life into it and putting into it, you're not going to get it back. You're not going to get that back out of it. Of course, something else is going to take precedence if you're placing another thing at the highest focal point of your life, of your business, your career, another person, whatever the case might be. So I don't want people to feel bad about this video, but I wanted to take a bit of a deeper look into how Christians should view marriage. And because every situation is different, so we won't talk about any specific situation, but a bit more of kind of the general tones of what we've seen. So let's go. Two camps of Christians, it seems to me. There are those who are okay with divorce, and obviously those who are not. So what is marriage? I'll just take kind of a secular look. First of all, Psychology Today defines it this way. It says marriage is the process by which two people make their relationship public, official, and permanent. It is the joining of two people in a bond that putatively lasts until death, but in practice is often cut short by separation or divorce. So it's interesting, this secular definition even defines marriage as being something permanent. It doesn't define it as something that was ever intended to be cut short. But in practice, it often is cut short because people get separated or divorced. So how do we look at this from a biblical stance? We look at Matthew 19 and the response that Jesus is giving to the Pharisees who are asking, is divorce even lawful? And it goes like this. Then some Pharisees came and tested him by asking, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason? Jesus answered, have you not read that from the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let man not separate. So why are we seeing so many divorces among Christians? Culture seems to accept divorce as an option, and to be honest, these Christians seem to accept divorce as an option, naturally, because they're getting divorced. And I've had several conversations with some of these believers who are getting divorced, and just out of curiosity, like what, from a believer standpoint, why do you feel it's okay to get divorced? And some cite Matthew 5:31 and Matthew 19:9 as allowing divorce, because these are two places where there seems to be an exception clause. It says in Matthew 5:31, it was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of unchastity, makes her commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Now, there's quite honestly a lot of problems with viewing this as some sort of exception to the rule. Problems with this is we don't find this, first of all, in parallel passages in the other Gospels. We don't see any kind of exclusion. So it's kind of odd that the biblical writers would have two varying ideas based on this. Also, it's not in Paul's definition of marriage. In Romans 7, verses 2-3, he says, a married woman is bound by law to her husband as long as he lives. But if her husband dies, she is discharged from the law concerning her husband. Accordingly, she will be called an adulteress if she lives with another man while her husband is alive. But if her husband dies, she is free from that law. And if she marries another man, she is not an adulteress. So the idea that is on display here is that as long as your husband, if you lawfully married into a marriage relationship, if your husband's still alive, you're still married. It doesn't stop just because you committed adultery. In fact, if she's still alive and you go sleep with another person, then you're committing adultery and you're making her an adulteress. Kind of an interesting dynamic at play. Additionally, many of the people that have been seeing get divorces and ones who I've spoken to about their decision, they're not citing adultery as a reason. This is what's mind-blowing to me. They're not citing adultery as a reason. So even if they use these exception verses to open the door to the possibility of divorce, their situation isn't applying to this particular case. Some of the cases that I've seen is people will point to these verses and say, well, yeah, in that verse it says adultery is a reason, but that just means that divorce is acceptable, regardless of the reason. That's kind of the logic that's been laid out, and I just don't follow that. It doesn't apply to their situation, so how can you say that, well, I just grew apart, I just don't love him the way that I love to. He just doesn't love me the way that I love to. I'd rather go find somebody that I love. It all boils back to this kind of me mentality. It boils back to this idea that if I'm not happy, I just need to make a change in my life and get rid of the things that don't make me happy rather than work on the things that are challenges in my life to make them even better. So how do we make sense of these exclusion passages? One of the ways that we can look at this is in Jesus' time, you had to wait a year before you consummated your marriage. So during that time, if there was infidelity before the bride and groom had the opportunity to consummate the marriage, so if you entered into the marriage covenant, but you didn't consummate for a year, and then the groom goes off and has a fling with the bride's sister or whatever the heck goes on back, 2,000 years ago, this could potentially be referring to that. Also, it's just a pretty unusual and unjust proposition, especially for what we are seeing today. Think about this. If adultery were grounds for divorce, a couple that wanted to be divorced, they could just simply say, hey, we're going to get divorced, but we need the grounds for divorce, so let's just go sleep with somebody, and then we have grounds for divorce because we're committing adultery, and so we can divorce our marriage vows. Which, that's just unjust. Like, why not just say, well, you could just get divorced? Like, that's fine. But it's also unjust because it's looking at the people who are being true and honest in their marriage and not committing adultery, but who may say, well, hey, I want to actually look out for the best interest of my spouse, and I don't want to do her wrong, and I don't want to commit adultery while I'm in this marital union. I just prefer to do a clean divorce. It's not being just, really, to the better intent, right? It's not being just to the intention that actually I would say is good versus the one that's malicious. So if two people want to get a divorce and they want to go enter into conjugal relations with someone else in order to make sure they can allow their divorce, it's a bit backwards. So it's not really justice. That being said, the church holds out that marriage can be null and void if it's entered into with the wrong intent. It's not allowing divorce, but actually declaring that a marriage was never really there to begin with. Both parties must not be coerced, but freely choosing to enter into marriage. Marriage at its core is intended to be a witness to the Trinitarian relationship, this play of lover, love, and beloved. It is a witness to the world that through the ups and downs, all the challenges that we face, through the grace of God, we can overcome anything and actually grow and prosper as people in that union. It's a witness to God's fidelity to the human race through our fidelity to our spouse. And when that love is fully lived out, it reproduces and can transform society. Just a closing thought, one of the divorces that just kind of came about, that was just announced in the past couple weeks, these people had a pretty large social media following, so I was reading some of the comments. It's so evident what divorce does, even to the people who are following the stories. The comments were, I feel lied to. I was really watching and looking up to you because of how you were living your marriage, and to see you divorce, it feels wrong to me because I feel lied to. I feel like this is dishonest. And I think that just is a big, big testimony to how innately we view marriage as intended to be something that you enter into and you just don't separate from it. You keep good on your word, and when something is challenging and something's not going right, you work on it. So if you have any thoughts, comments, drop them down below. Definitely share this around with somebody who may need to hear this message if you feel like you need to share it. And definitely hit that like button and pound that subscribe button like you mean it so you can get more of this awesome content. And from all of us here at Practical Theism, we'll talk soon. Thanks.